There comes a moment when you either command your mind or become its prisoner. And most people spend their entire lives obeying thoughts that sabotage them. What if the greatest enemy you face is living inside your own head? If this idea hits you deeply, like and subscribe. Because here we uncover truths that most people spend a lifetime avoiding. There are days when your own mind drags you into fear, laziness, doubt, and hesitation. It tells you that you are not enough, that you should stop trying, that comfort is safer than growth. But according to Rockefeller's mindset, greatness begins when you stop negotiating with your weaknesses, when you finally decide to take control of the inner voice that has been controlling you for years. Let me tell you something about John D. Rockefeller that most people never learn in school. This man wasn't born with advantages. He wasn't handed a fortune. He wasn't naturally gifted with supernatural confidence. What made him the wealthiest person in modern history was something far more powerful than luck or connections. It was his ability to force his mind into absolute submission to his will. While other men were slaves to their emotions, Rockefeller became the master of his thoughts. While others let doubt paralyze them, he trained his mind to see opportunity where others saw obstacles. While others crumbled under pressure, he conditioned his mental state to remain calm and calculating in the midst of chaos. The difference between those who achieve extraordinary success and those who live ordinary lives isn't talent, education, or even opportunity. It's mental discipline. It's the willingness to grab your mind by the throat and demand that it serve your vision instead of your fears. Your mind is a servant, not a master. But most people have this relationship backwards. They wake up and immediately surrender control to whatever thoughts happen to arise. They let their minds dictate their moods, their actions, their entire day. They become reactive creatures, bouncing from one emotional state to another like a pinball. Rockefeller understood something fundamental about human psychology. Your thoughts react to patterns you allowed to form over years. When you stop questioning them, they start ruling your life. Every successful person in history has discovered this truth. They realized that their minds were like wild horses that needed to be broken and trained. Think about it. Right now, as you're listening to this, your mind is probably generating dozens of thoughts. Some supportive, some critical, some completely random. Most people just accept whatever thoughts appear and assume those thoughts represent reality. But what if those thoughts are wrong? What if they're based on outdated beliefs, childhood programming, or simply mental habits that no longer serve you? Rockefeller trained himself to observe his thoughts like a scientist studying specimens. He would notice when his mind tried to pull him toward worry, fear, or doubt. Instead of being controlled by these mental patterns, he learned to redirect them. He understood that thoughts are not facts. They're just electrical impulses in your brain that you can learn to control. When you start treating your mind as a tool that you operate instead of a master that you obey, everything changes. You stop being the victim of your own thinking. You become the architect of your mental state. You realize that confidence, focus, and determination aren't personality traits you're born with. They're mental muscles you can develop through consistent practice. But here's where most people fail. They try to control their minds through willpower alone. They think they can just decide to think differently and magically transform their inner dialogue. That's like trying to build physical strength by wishing your muscles were bigger. Real mental discipline requires a systematic approach. Discomfort is the gate to power. Every time you avoid discomfort, your mind learns that fear is stronger than your will. This is perhaps the most important principle Rockefeller applied to his own development. He deliberately sought out situations that challenged him mentally and emotionally. He understood that strength is built in silence, in those private moments when no one is watching, and you have to choose between what's easy and what's right. Most people run from discomfort. They structure their entire lives around avoiding anything that makes them feel anxious, uncertain, or challenged. They stay in jobs they hate because looking for something better feels scary. They avoid difficult conversations because conflict makes them uncomfortable. They choose familiar mediocrity over uncertain excellence because their minds have trained them to see discomfort as danger. But Rockefeller flipped this equation. He trained his mind to interpret discomfort as opportunity. When something felt challenging or uncertain, he recognized that as a sign he was moving in the right direction. He conditioned himself to feel excited by obstacles instead of defeated by them. This isn't about being reckless or ignoring real dangers. It's about recognizing that most of the discomfort we experience comes from imaginary threats. Your mind is constantly running worst-case scenarios, catastrophizing minor setbacks, and convincing you that you're not capable of handling challenges that you've actually overcome many times before. When you start deliberately exposing yourself to manageable discomfort, something profound happens. Your mind begins to recalibrate its threat detection system. Things that used to feel overwhelming start feeling manageable. Situations that used to trigger anxiety start feeling like puzzles to solve. Your confidence grows not because you tell yourself you're confident, but because you accumulate evidence that you can handle whatever life throws at you. Rockefeller practiced this principle in small ways every single day. Waking up when he didn't want to. Working when his mind preferred distraction. Making difficult decisions when his emotions pulled him toward procrastination. Each small act of discipline rewired his neural pathways. Each time he chose discomfort over ease, he was literally reshaping his brain to serve his goals instead of his impulses. Your inner voice shapes your reality more than any external circumstance. If your mind constantly tells you you're tired, unlucky, or incapable, life will simply follow that script. This is where most people lose the game before it even begins. They have an internal narrator that spends all day pointing out their flaws, predicting their failures, and convincing them that they're not cut out for success. Rockefeller trained himself to replace emotional impulses with strategic clarity. Instead of letting his mind run wild with worry or doubt, he developed the habit of asking better questions. Instead of, "What if this fails?" he would ask, "How can I make this succeed?" Instead of, "What if people judge me?" he would ask, "What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail?" This shift in internal dialogue might seem small, but it creates massive changes in behavior. When your mind is focused on solutions instead of problems, you naturally start taking actions that move you toward your goals. When your thoughts are centered on possibilities instead of limitations, you begin to notice opportunities that were always there but invisible to your problem-focused mindset. The quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask yourself. Most people ask terrible questions all day long. Why does this always happen to me? What's wrong with me? Why can't I ever get ahead? These questions train your mind to search for evidence of your inadequacy and bad luck. Successful people like Rockefeller ask empowering questions. What can I learn from this setback? How is this challenge making me stronger? What opportunity is hidden in this problem? These questions direct your mental energy toward growth, learning, and possibility. But changing your internal dialogue requires more than just positive thinking. It requires you to catch yourself in the act of negative self-talk and consciously redirect your attention. It means developing the awareness to notice when your mind is running destructive programs and the discipline to interrupt those patterns. When the mind obeys, success becomes predictable, not accidental. This is perhaps the most powerful insight from studying Rockefeller's approach to mental discipline. Most people experience success as something that happens to them randomly. They have good days and bad days, with no apparent pattern or control. They feel like victims of circumstance, riding an emotional roller coaster that they can't influence. But when you develop true mental discipline, success stops being a matter of luck. You become capable of generating the mental states that lead to productive action regardless of your circumstances. You can access focus when you need to work. You can summon courage when you need to take risks. You can maintain optimism when you need to persist through setbacks. This doesn't mean you'll never experience negative emotions or challenging thoughts. It means you won't be controlled by them. You'll have the tools to work with your mind instead of against it. You'll understand that your mental state is something you can influence, not something that happens to you randomly. The weakling mentality versus the builder mentality represents a fundamental choice that every person faces multiple times throughout their life. The weakling waits for motivation. The builder acts with or without it. One stays stuck, the other grows. One obeys fear, the other commands it. Your future depends on which one you choose to become. Understanding this distinction is crucial because it reveals why most people never reach their potential. They're waiting for external conditions to change before they start taking action. They want to feel confident before they do scary things. They want to feel motivated before they start working on their goals. They want to feel ready before they begin pursuing their dreams. But builders like Rockefeller understood that action creates motivation, not the other way around. Confidence comes from doing things that scare you, not from avoiding them. Readiness is something you develop through practice, not something you wait to feel naturally. The weakling mentality is seductive because it feels logical. Why wouldn't you wait until you feel prepared? Why wouldn't you want to have all the answers before you begin? Why wouldn't you want to feel confident before you take risks? The problem is that these feelings rarely arrive on their own. They're created through action, not contemplation. Builders understand that the path to mastery runs directly through incompetence. You don't become good at something by studying it endlessly or waiting until you feel ready. You become good at something by doing it badly until you learn to do it well. You develop confidence by taking action despite feeling uncertain. You build strength by lifting weights that feel heavy. This principle applies to every area of life. You don't become a confident public speaker by reading books about public speaking. You become confident by speaking in public over and over again until your nervous system adapts. You don't become a successful entrepreneur by creating the perfect business plan. You become successful by starting a business and learning from the inevitable mistakes and setbacks. Rockefeller embodied this builder mentality from an early age. He didn't wait for permission to start his first business. He didn't wait until he felt ready to negotiate with powerful men. He didn't wait until he had all the answers before making important decisions. He trained his mind to be comfortable with uncertainty and to find excitement in the process of figuring things out as he went along. The difference between these two mentalities shows up in how people respond to setbacks. The weakling interprets failure as evidence that they should give up. The builder interprets failure as information about how to improve. The weakling sees obstacles as signs that they're on the wrong path. The builder sees obstacles as opportunities to develop problem-solving skills. Your mind will naturally gravitate toward the weakling mentality because it feels safer. Your brain is designed to keep you alive, not to help you thrive. From your brain's perspective, trying new things is dangerous. Taking risks is stupid. Standing out from the crowd is asking for trouble. These instincts served our ancestors well when physical survival was the primary concern, but they often sabotage us in the modern world, where psychological courage is more valuable than physical strength. This is why mental discipline is so important. You have to consciously override your brain's default programming. You have to train your mind to interpret growth opportunities as rewards instead of threats. You have to develop the habit of moving toward your fears instead of away from them. Rockefeller spent decades training his mind to operate like a builder instead of a weakling. When other businessmen panicked during market downturns, he saw opportunities to acquire assets at discounted prices. When competitors tried to destroy him, he used their attacks as motivation to become even more successful. When critics questioned his methods, he remained focused on his vision instead of getting distracted by their opinions. This mental conditioning allowed him to make decisions based on logic and long-term strategy instead of emotions and short-term comfort. While others were paralyzed by uncertainty, he was energized by possibility. While others complained about unfair conditions, he adapted his approach and found ways to win regardless of the rules. The most successful people throughout history have shared this common trait. They've learned to command their minds instead of being commanded by them. They've developed the ability to generate the mental states that serve their goals instead of being victims of whatever thoughts happen to arise. But here's what most people don't understand about mental discipline. It's not about suppressing negative thoughts or pretending that challenges don't exist. It's about developing a different relationship with your inner experience. It's about becoming curious about your thoughts instead of being controlled by them. It's about learning to observe your emotions instead of being overwhelmed by them. When you develop this observer perspective, you realize that thoughts and emotions are temporary experiences that pass through your consciousness, like clouds passing through the sky. You don't have to believe every thought you think. You don't have to act on every emotion you feel. You can learn to choose which mental experiences deserve your attention, and which ones you can simply let pass by. This skill becomes incredibly powerful when you're facing major challenges or pursuing ambitious goals. Instead of being derailed by self-doubt, criticism, or temporary setbacks, you can maintain your focus on what matters most. Instead of being reactive to circumstances, you can remain proactive toward your vision. Rockefeller demonstrated this principle throughout his career. When journalists attacked him in the press, he didn't waste energy defending himself or seeking revenge. He stayed focused on building his business. When competitors tried to undermine him, he didn't get distracted by fighting battles that didn't serve his larger purpose. He channeled his energy into becoming so successful that their attacks became irrelevant. This level of mental discipline requires daily practice. You can't develop it by reading about it or thinking about it. You have to exercise it like a muscle. You have to create situations where you practice choosing your response instead of reacting automatically. You have to build the habit of pausing between stimulus and response to ask yourself what action would best serve your goals. Most people live in a constant state of mental reactivity. Something happens, and they automatically respond based on their conditioning. Someone criticizes them, and they feel hurt. Something doesn't go according to plan, and they feel frustrated. They encounter an obstacle, and they feel defeated. These reactions happen so quickly that they don't even realize they have a choice. But there's always a choice. There's always a gap between what happens and how you respond, even if that gap is only a fraction of a second. Mental discipline is about expanding that gap and using it to choose responses that align with your values and goals instead of your immediate emotional impulses. In the end, your destiny is shaped by one decision: obey the mind that weakens you, or forge the mind that builds you. This choice isn't something you make once and forget about. It's something you face dozens of times every single day. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, growth over security, action over hesitation, you're reinforcing the neural pathways that will determine who you become. Comment, "I choose discipline," if this message made sense to you. Like and share if you're ready to stop being controlled by your thoughts and start controlling them instead. Your life changes the moment your mind stops resisting and starts obeying your conscious direction instead of your unconscious programming. The path forward isn't easy, but it's simple. Start small. Choose one area where you've been letting your mind control you instead of the other way around. Maybe it's hitting the snooze button every morning. Maybe it's procrastinating on important tasks. Maybe it's avoiding difficult conversations. Pick one pattern and commit to changing it through consistent daily practice. Remember that every time you override your mind's default programming, you're building the mental muscle that will serve you in every area of your life. Every small victory creates momentum for bigger victories. Every act of discipline makes the next act of discipline easier. Every choice to build instead of weaken compound over time to create the kind of mental strength that makes extraordinary achievement not just possible, but inevitable. Your mind is waiting for orders. The question is, what are you going to command it to do?